And welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 239. I am your moderator, Lauren Gray. With me, hopefully soon, will be some of my co-hosts. Although, listening to the email roster running around, I think we have an epidemic of hangnails or something. All of a sudden, everyone's not feeling well. I'm going to attribute it to hangnails. It has to be something like that. But anyway, Mr. Robert Cole has always given us an excellent curated list. And he started his email. For those of you who don't get his email list that he shares with us just prior to the show, sometimes literally just prior to the show, you can get signed up for it at bit.ly/rock cheetah, all lowercase, no space. It is an amazingly excellent, well-curated list, as those that know the show historically have. That the list used to be given just to the board members of HSMAI, the Hospitality Sales Marketing Association International, both the revenue and marketing boards. And that was because Robert was on one of them. Oh, good morning, Miss Cat. How are you?
Good morning. Great. How are you?
I was just doing great. Wonderful. Actually, I just came back from San Antonio, the Navigate conference with Navis. I was just talking about Robert's wonderful list and the origin of it, and that people should sign up and get it. Did you get your copy?
I did actually, and there are a few articles in there that piqued my interest, and it was great to see that it wasn't all coronavirus and sadness.
Yes. I did like his preface to it. It really resonated with the fact that, and let me just actually read a little bit of the preface so that why I'm referring to it so much. He talked about the actual slowdown growth rate of our industry right now, and this isn't anything really to do with the impact on the coronavirus. This is literally our industry's momentum over the course of 3 years. As we all know, Robert personally, he is a data junkie, and he keeps his own data. He doesn't refer upon this. Why he's probably hired by the Focusrites and the JD Powers of the world, because he is one of those people that truly only bases his direction on numbers with real numbers and not just quasi numbers. But he was talking about
hunches, like our
hunches, guesstimates, and opinions, which everyone seems to have with lack of backup. He said there was 3 takeaways to his numbers showing year-over-year growth rate of occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR. And he said, in short, the U.S. hotel industry occupancy percentage growth rate has dropped 50 base points in each of the past 2 years. He bases this not on he has a rolling 12 month that he runs with, and he doesn't base it on monthly. He bases it, like, for instance, by week, so that you have that kind of nullifies the weekday shift or the additional day, like in this case for leap year and so forth. It nullifies a lot of those effects numerically because you're just rolling it forward by week. And he says also the average daily rate growth has also been cut in half since last year. Unfortunately, that combination produces a pathetic 0.74% growth rate in revenue per available room, or RevPAR, as we like to refer to it. So the bottom line, the industry isn't growing. And it's also eliminating any cushion for any looming demand displacement, which brings us to the Corona conversation, because we are in those times right now where we are getting that diminished demand. And I have to say, we're all out of the woodwork. Do these people have webinars all of a sudden? Do you see everybody's throwing out webinars about save the world?
Sure, and in a way, I'm happy for it because we've been able to take them and not have to reproduce them. The CDC came out with one, as well as Ecolab, and we've been able to utilize both in sharing them as resources for our members. But it's coming straight from the source, the folks that have the data of the actual count of viruses, who's getting vaccinations and recovering and so on. So
yes,
they are coming out of the woodwork in a way. Good. Thankfully, I'm happy for one of the articles Robert had added on the list. I reposted on my LinkedIn regarding what's your coronavirus strategy at your hotel, and I put hashtag prevention is better than cure. Get ahead of it. We another one of, I really liked a lot of the.
No, go right ahead. You're here. No one else is. So you go right ahead. I'm just going to sit back and see what's coming up. Welcome to Cat Show. Take it away.
But I really love that, the just having a strategy in mind, and it. I know that yesterday I was speaking with actually Felix Ahmed. I had done a little intro for him, and he works in the restaurant side, and he was telling me how there isn't a lot of information being sent out on restaurants and how to manage them, and they have an even higher level of exposure with how much touching and food and exposure there is from people coming in, plus the food. And I thought it was great to see that there was a pretty good checklist of things you can do to prepare for your hotel before you get hit. And of course, on there it had do not discount, do not go discount crazy, and become more experience and value focused versus the room rate focused.
Yes, yes, and then just like I said, I just came back from San Antonio, so I got to see firsthand people's change in traveling.
Mm.
We had some that had the RN45 masks on, walking around, and then we had some people just wrap a scarf around their face. And I'm like, well, that's going to be helpful, but not the pandemic. People have to realize culturally, in the Eastern culture, wearing a mask has been around for a long time. Because of pollution, because of just wanting to breathe better in very dense populations. People have been wearing masks in those countries for a long time. So for them, it's more of a natural thing to be doing that regularly. For here, we're tend to not be those people. I'm one of those geeks that during flu season, I do actually have a mask that I put on when I get on the plane with a low charcoal filter thing. I look like Darth Vader. Luke, you're from my
Yeah.
father. And people always give me weird looks, but it's like I actually don't get many flu things. I think it helps me in some ways. So I did notice that in the men's bathroom, gosh bless them, they're actually washing their hands this time.
Thank God, it's happening.
If this is what gets guys to wash their hands, I'm all for it. It's the duration thing, though. You can see some people are more concerned with it. Mr. Tim Peter, how are you, sir?
Hello.
They're definitely more concerned about it because they are washing their hands, and also some of them are actually washing them like more than just a splish splash. Okay,
That's actually why I was late. I mean, it's singing happy birthday 3 times. It takes a really long time. Yeah. Well, I want to be extra careful.
Extra clean for the
show. A friend of mine, somebody I follow on Twitter who I've communicated with a bunch of times, put together a list of other songs where the chorus is at least 20 seconds long. And my personal favorite, of course, is Prince, Raspberry Beret. So use that if you need to.
Better.
Well, that's a good one to share, actually.
The kind you find in a second-hand stone.
Anyway, I want to sing that one now.
And then you're clean.
And now Kat has immediately regretted joining the show.
Okay, we're talking about male hygiene. I'm supportive. I'm happy.
Yeah, really, right?
That's a phrase I've never heard before, by the way.
Those people usually don't go.
Yeah, those very well.
So I had to go for it.
That's good. That's gonna be our new oxymoron instead of
yeah. But it is funny, and I mean, I was just like I said in San Antonio, and the local news, of course, is very heightened because of the containment of the people that came from the cruise ship. Actually,
sure.
Yeah, and they're being released now next Tuesday. It's like D-Day.
Right.
Seriously, it's captivating because they made the mistake of one of the women that was brought over was released too early. And she went to the local mall and she went to a local hotel before and blah, 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 before she was going to be traveling. And then she contracted it and they brought her back. Well, oh my gosh. That was like the hotel got shut down. The mall got shut down. Every place she went to. And then and on the news, they were showing literally she was here 2 hours and 7 minutes. She was here 3 hours. I mean, it was like
laugh about this, but
yeah, but it was this thing, yeah. So
that could be a revenue stream for hotels, though, as quarantine centers.
In desperate times,
Sorry,
that's
God.
really attractive, right? Quarantine centers.
But think about it. You can earn loyalty points while you're there.
Yes,
that you can hopefully get to use, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's giving new meaning to the terms earn and burn.
Do it just before renovation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I will tell you, I heard what you guys were saying when I first came on about the fact that the biggest problem is nobody knows how long it's going to last. I think that I'm very concerned for the cruise, the cruise industry. Not just because of the economic impacts, obviously, but also because of the brand impacts that, literally somebody who said, somebody I know said to me the other day, so these cruise ships are basically just floating plague barges, aren't they? And I was like, well, there's a phrase we really don't want to see catch on in the in the market,
Right?
That
I think Robert even pointed it out. Airline crews get discounts for travel. as well. They should. Anybody, and he was pointing out, usually the cruise industry provides good discounts for and so forth, but he did that little math breakdown on some of the offers that are on the airline cruise site as to what you can get cruises for, down to less than $30 a day.
Yeah, which is
insane. That's crazy.
That's
so
insane.
You can imagine. Yeah, this is not a good time to be a marketer for cruises, because literally you're going to be sitting there going, how are we going to wrap this up with a bow? Because, there's they're literally banning travel to the east, well, to the west, that way. And you got to figure it's going to dampen on the fact that, do you really want to get caught on a boat when it's discovered that it might have something like this on it? Because from the news what happens to those boats.
Right.
They get stuck in the middle of nowhere, and they're going to let you sit there and just be a little incubator.
Right. Nuke them from space, I think is the right where they're heading with this. Just float them out to sea and blow them up. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And then, no. I was going to say, but we did talk last week a little bit about the fact that it does put also a bit of a shadow on major density metro markets like the New Yorks, the Miamis, the Chicagos, the Los Angeles, and so forth, because people are giving second consideration to changing their plans already for that.
Well, I forget where I read it. I thought one of the interesting things, and also not good for the hotel industry, but good for travel more broadly, was that this could do very well for alternative accommodations, for the Airbnbs of the world and things like that, where guests may be more inclined, and there seems to be some very early evidence that this is true-ish. There's I don't know how meaningful the numbers will be, but it certainly had a truthy feel to it. That, I would rather stay in a place where I'm not in a hotel with, 50 other guests or 100 other guests or 200 other guests, but I'm just in this one apartment by itself. It's a little more isolated. I don't know if that's true, but I could certainly see that gaining some mind share with customers, that makes a certain degree of sense.
Yeah.
Whether it's logical or not. Hey, Robert.
Good morning, Mr. Gold.
So I'm sorry I'm late. I was washing my hands, and I've been having to sing Stairway to Heaven twice. So
it's all variants on the same joke, Robert.
No, I heard you say that earlier.
Got it. Okay.
I was on another call that I was able to have you guys at kind of low volume to hear what you were saying. Can I do a quick counterpoint to Tim's thing, though?
Sure, please.
Because I don't know what the answer is on the alternative accommodation. But do you also have the thing where if it's an individual apartment, you don't know who stayed there before?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if it's a plus or minus. It's hard to say.
Yeah, so. I think that's very, very fair.
I think in some ways, especially with Italy in particular, with their concerns, and justifiably, I guess, is this gives them a huge chance to pause on this over-tourism conversation.
I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry. I'm a horrible person. I want to be very clear about that.
Me too.
I wish no ill will on anybody or anything along those lines. I don't mean to be a jerk by any stretch, because this is terrible, and people, we want healthy people and everything else, and it's terrible for the industry and the like. But boy, in the Italy situation, if this isn't a case of be careful what you wish for,
right?
I don't know what is. Like, this is not the way you want to, stop over tourism.
Right.
I don't know what the right way to I legitimately have been trying to give a lot of thought lately to the over-tourism problem and how do we do sustainable travel in a better way. And I will be the first to admit I have no good answers on this. Yep. At the same time, I'm really confident that this is not the way to do that.
No. Definitely this is not the way to do that, yes.
And I was going to say, in that Expedia article about how they solved their $100 million problem, it highlighted in relation to coronavirus the fact that being proactive is not like the first thought, because it's much harder to show what has come from it, the ROI on that proactivity.
Right.
And it has turned into a mental, stream of, hey, we can't prove to our stakeholders this is the way we should go, so let's go with what'll make them happy.
Right.
But how interesting the psychology of that. And how it's playing into not only what Expedia experienced, but also this.
Yeah. Well, I just to go back to the uncertainty aspect for one moment. I mean, I had somebody who I think is pretty smart and knows stuff about stuff when it comes to these kinds of things tell me something that I thought was dark. It was not a happy story, but it was a but it has very much a silver lining in that I can't remember which virus it is. I can never remember the exact order of the letters. H1N5 or H5N1.
Oh, H1N1.
H1N1. Whatever. Yeah, had a fatality rate of 60%, 60, right?
Oh, yeah.
And which is horrific, right? And but that's the fact that it was incredibly fatal. The fact that it was incredibly damaging was actually one of the reasons why it didn't spread widely, for two reasons. One, you felt so bad when you got it. The first thing you did was you went to the hospital, which then restricted your ability to infect other people. Sadly, the second thing you did when you got it was typically you died, which also reduced your ability to infect other people. Mm-hmm. But collectively, not a lot of people got it. A lot of people died. Anytime anybody dies, that's a big number. So I don't want to minimize this by any stretch. But the actual total number of people who got the disease and died was, in relative terms, very small. Tens of people, because the fatality rate was so high, it reduced its ability to spread. And so my friend who works in public health was saying the fact that the COVID-19 is people don't feel that bad, right? So they don't go to the hospital, they don't stay home, they don't take care of themselves, which is causing its spread. And it's certainly fatal, a high degree of fatality compared to something like the flu, but not so high that it's also reducing the number of people who are spreading it, is actually a net positive in the bigger picture. It's going to be very hard to contain. This may be something we deal with for a very, very long time. In terms of, one theory that I've heard going around is that, going forward, we may just have seasonal cold, flu, and COVID-19 season. Right. Yep. And it just becomes a norm from that perspective, because, and I want to be very clear about this, I'm not trying to diminish anything, no one dies, right? It's, not as dangerous as other illnesses that have previously caused some impacts.
Well, and once you get a vaccine that works effectively, and the thing will mutate just like the regular,
of course,
flu, and you have different strains and things like that. But there was a great article which actually didn't make the list because
By the way, I like that Kat is looking at a disinfectant right now as we're having this discussion.
Yeah, because my daycare owner had of my daughter's daycare had pointed out that coronavirus was listed on the bottles, and I was like, let me see the one that I have if it's actually on here.
Yeah. No, for the surfaces, that's okay. There's a lot of stuff. The problem is you can't put that, like the people drinking bleach, not a good idea. That's not the right.
Gargling with Lysol, we're not recommending on the show.
Not recommending that. And you mentioned the preschool. My wife works at a preschool, and she does all the procurement and getting all the stuff. And we were running around yesterday trying to go to Sam's, and they start at 18 months, right? So you have kids with diapers. And they're super sustainable and organic and all sorts. And they would go to like Costco to get these. Well, those wipes just aren't even there. And Costco rearranges stores aren't listen. And so all of a sudden, all this hoarding is now really going to be a bad situation. So,
well, if there's any solstice in this, is that the guy that I saw with the was it the RN45 mask, the ones that have the carbon filter box on the front of it? He was on the plane. He looked like he was in misery because he had a big head. and for those things to really work, they have to be. They're not meant for comfort.
You also need to shave. You can't.
Yeah, he was in this. It was he had your haircut, Tim, and he had this line in the back, and he refused to take it off. He's sweating around it. The strap's digging into his head, back of his neck, and it's like, wow, okay. It did not look like a happy thing.
And when the flight attendant came by, he said, "I'll have a Diet Coke, please."
Yeah, exactly.
And a straw.
And a straw. Exactly.
Yeah.
A straw made of carbon nanofibers.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yes, out of abundance of caution, of course, so forth and so on. But I think we have to take, and Robbie, you did this great last week's show, talking about the reality of data, the true data, and the ones that are contrived. And the links that we shared last week's show, the numbers, the real infectious rate, the real openings and so forth that's happening, and the real risk people at risk have to be considered as well. Most of us will probably have this, we treat it as a cold, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood. It's just, it creates that unfortunate physical feeling without being at risk.
Well, so. And the article that Robert shared, and I'm gonna do a shameless plug, but who we kid? That's what I do. Robert shared a really good article from Max Starkov on LinkedIn. It's in the show notes right now. There was another place, Hospitality Net has a good live blog as well. Robert shared the one from FocusWire. Hospitality Net has a good one, and one of the things Hospitality Net did was it also asked a bunch of folks, and I was one of them. Max was one of them. A bunch of people for what is your strategy and how are you coping and things like that. And there's about 10 or 11 folks who wrote replies to that, and at least all but one are good. So you should definitely check them out. but a lot of it is and I forget who said this, but this idea of is a discount going to make the difference between somebody prioritizing their pocketbook or their health, right? Probably not. So discounting right now is probably the wrong thing to do. It's certainly something I would argue against. Do value adds, do other things that make it that make you a good choice for the folks who are coming to market. But cutting rates just is going to put you in a much worse position in the long run.
Well, Tim, I don't know if you caught last week's show, and I was talking about the fact that I was shaking my head at the absurdity of how brand and big box hotels are responding to this in two different markets in particular, Vancouver and San Antonio, that I have direct relationships with. Mm-hmm. And they did exactly what everybody said they would never do. We're never going to go just dump inventory into the OTAs. We're never just going to dump rate to maintain occupancy. And that's exactly what they did.
Right.
And I'm kind of just like, oh my gosh. And we talked about some strategies last week about how to.
Was it the brand or was it the individual property?
Well, both. Every brand in market dropped rate. Every box, whether it was independent or brand.
Which, by the way, that's the number one reason you shouldn't cut rates. That is the number one reason. And people miss this all the time is there may have been a time, I don't know that this ever existed, but maybe there was a time where you could have dropped rates and picked up some occupancy quickly before your competitors caught wind of what your rates were. Yeah. Today, everybody knows what everybody's rates are. So if you drop rates and everybody else follows you, all you've done is lower the rates for everybody in market. You're not going to gain any additional occupancy from that. All you're doing is getting less money from the people who are actually coming in the first place.
Right.
It is a
death spiral.
It is a death spiral. I wrote a post about this on my blog, and I've been talking about this for longer. But the blog post goes back to like 2011 or something like this. I've been talking about this for more than a decade, and I didn't make this up. This is a known thing. They teach this in case studies in business school and have for probably 50 years of, it's a race to the bottom. And much like war games, the best way to win the race is don't run it.
Right. Yeah. Now, in reality of going back to the article that you referred to, Kat, that is about, do you have a coronavirus strategy? There's real and imminent decisions that have to be made right now. I'll give you a case example of this is that what's your cancellation policy variations?
Yeah.
I have people coming back to me already with hotels that had booked pre-arrival, pre-purchase programs we had, and they were coming to a conference, and the conference got canceled.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there going, okay, do we do the, sorry to hear that, but you still paid us? Or do we do the sorry to hear that and we're happy to give you all the money back? Or, so let me ask that question, everybody. What are some choices that you would consider as options for the hotel to do? Because I'll tell you what we do after that.
I would think if you want to not refund, say, hey, we'll keep this as a credit for you, or refund a portion and offer a credit for your next stay. Throwing some extra hand sanities in your room.
I agree completely. Credit the stay for a future stay. On pre-purchase stuff, it gets a little tighter. But if it's somebody who booked 6 months ago and it's their honeymoon, maybe give them the money back. I mean, think about what kind of relationship you're trying to develop with the guest, and I think there's a little bit of case by case, but the default case should be give them a credit for future stay.
My argument would be to give them a credit for future stay, because the last thing you want to do is to have someone who's feeling kind of sick, but they don't want to lose their money, so they're going to show up at your hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, thank you
That's
very
not
much.
a
It made me
good
feel good
strategy.
about our decision. I add one nuance to this, because you always want to empower your front desk teams. And I told him, I says, look, if it's conference versus leisure, that's the first thing to consider. If it's leisure, automatically give them their money back. Okay. Yeah, because they're going to come back.
Right.
If it's conference business related, the likelihood of them coming back is less. So giving them a credit may not be the enticement. We're giving them the option of, we can give this to you as a credit, or we can do our penalty of one night's room and tax if you're never finding yourself back to the market. But we will give you a credit just so you don't lose it. And then again, to your point, Tim, in extreme circumstances where it's just the likelihood of them never redeeming the credit, we're really just irritating them. Just sorry that was the case. Please, here it is. Here's your money. Because at the end of the day, eccentrically, we're not looking to go over and irritate people, but we do want to maintain business integrity. So yeah, those are the choices that we kind of slivered it out to. So, but that's real current right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I got people coming in lower than our 48-hour cancellation, going, "Oh, I'm not coming in tomorrow." Now it turns into a little harder finite line to say, "Did you just get sick?"
Right.
Well, and the airlines, United is basically saying, they're waiving, change fees and all that sort of stuff. Now they aren't giving money back, but they're waiving change fees for anything that's booked this month. So,
and I want to build on something Robert said a moment ago about if they're not feeling well, do you really want them to come in the first place? One of the things I put in my piece for Hospitality Net, and I've heard some other people say similar things, is do the same with your staff, by the way.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
If you should have a zero tolerance policy for people coming to work when they're sick right now. Stay home. You don't want to get the other staff sick. You don't want to get guests sick. Yep. And I hate to say this because this is going to sound a little more mercenary, but on anybody who's hourly, it's also a cost savings to you, right? Which is terrible because it's bad for the employee, right? But
you'll increase the likelihood of people showing up, taking some Advil, hide their symptoms, and then come to work.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, you'd pay them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, right. But I mean, I'm not going to tell properties en masse, here's what you should do. They have to decide for themselves, but you should have a zero tolerance
that at
policy.
the daycare all the time too.
Oh yeah.
When all their kids up, drop them off because you can't afford it. You don't have options.
Yeah. That's right.
Completely and utterly.
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I said, just having recently traveled, just gotten off the bus yesterday.
I did too, actually.
Where were you?
I was in New Orleans and came back yesterday. So they were
Thank you for supporting our industry.
I'm traveling next week, Charleston and Phoenix.
One thing I noticed on the planes is, first off, people's rituals have changed. As soon as they're sitting down, they're wiping things down. I think over half the people on the plane, that's the first thing that they did, and I'm not exaggerating the number. It really, people were coming out in the scissors and slowed down people getting on the plane because you can't sit down until you do your cleaning thing. So all of a sudden, it just choked loading the plane as people are trying to wipe stuff and before they sit down and all that. That was painful. And the other is, if anybody coughs, first there's a glance. If they cough again or a second or third time, it's a stare.
But it's a great way to get the whole aisle free for you, Lauren.
Oh, seriously? Somebody got to do this little coughing thing in the back, and literally you watch everybody looking around going, Yeah, they're gonna hate. I'm throw them out of the plane or what?
I'm on a bunch of flights next week. I have terrible sinuses, and the pressure changes always gives me a postnasal drip, so I cough constantly. People are gonna think I'm like playing.
They're gonna throw you off the plane, Tim.
Right?
They're gonna pop the back door.
A shirt or a cardboard sign, something.
Exactly. Well, it's a shame that my new phone case is a hazmat suit. I mean, that's gonna look.
That's right. So. I threw a article that didn't make the list because I decided to do the Focus Wire live blog because Kevin's doing a pretty good job of putting.
He's doing a very good stuff
there. But there was a Bloomberg article, which Tim, you were mentioning, like the fatality and the R0s, things like that. So you have two basic challenges. One is how deadly is the disease, and so Ebola was like 50%, which is really bad. MERS was about 35%. Smallpox was 30%. SARS was around 10%. COVID-19 right now is 3.4, but they think it's going to drop to 1 because you have a lot of unreported cases. The measles, though, is like 0.2% right?
Well, the
And
flu
the
is
measles
0.2% also.
well, they had
Or like
the flu is
0.3.
1/10%.
0.1%. Okay.
Right. So the challenge is, of course,
Which is
that
a lot, by the way, when you think about how many people get the flu every year. Like that's
oh yeah, that's a
it's a
huge,
tiny
huge number.
percentage, but it's a lot of people.
And COVID-19 is 10x that,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And basically this goes into, you wind up with a problem with like numbers of hospital beds in the US and stuff like that, right? Because the flu is 300,000 to 600,000 deaths and 4 to 8 million hospitalizations, right? But there are only just a little under 1 million staffed hospital beds, right? So that's a problem. The other side, though, is basically how easily it's spread. Whoops, and let me get to that chart.
Virality is what they call it.
Right. So the measles, basically which is the R naught, right, is the factor. You see it as RO. Measles is 15, so that means the average person, when they get the measles, anyone who's not vaccinated gets it too, right? It's 15 people for every individual who contracts it. Smallpox is around 5, SARS is around 3. COVID-19 is 2.8, which is
they think.
Yeah. Well, and this is the they're saying
correct. The best numbers available to us.
About 3 people. You get it. 3 people get it. And you look at the group, the guy in New York, right? The lawyer, his wife got it, his child got it, the neighbor who drove him to the hospital got it. Not good. Ebola was only 1.9, kind of thankfully. Seasonal flu, again, 1.3. So here, COVID-19 is twice as contagious as the seasonal flu, and it's 10 times as bad. So all of a sudden, these guys are saying you've got this 40x multiplier, basically, right? Which is not good. So you've got these million hospital beds.
Oh, sure.
Which normally 4 to 8 million hospitalizations in the U.S., and now you toss a 40x factor on that. That's not good. Right. So that's the downside.
So, Robert, I have a question for you. To take this to the business side for a second, and I will be honest. I was never good with like biology and stuff in school. This is not my area of expertise by any stretch. And people have these conversations, I get itchy. So I want to talk about money.
I was a teaching assistant in that.
See, I want to talk about money instead. That's stuff I'm way more comfortable with. I'm way more comfortable. I don't get itchy when we talk about money.
I want to talk about high school. We had to inject little tiny baby chickens in the neck with big syringes. Oh,
please stop.
So,
okay. You can hit the button, Tim, on them.
Okay, I'll be back. I'm going to go take like 3 showers. So, Robert, you're my go-to when it comes to economic trends and the long arc of history in the industry. So
don't ask me about 1918 influenza. I was not there.
But from what you know, right? We've seen this when there have been little, interruptions, whether it was SARS, whether it was, avian flu. We've seen it with bigger interruptions of, 9/11 and 2008, 2009, et cetera. You reach a point, and Kat, you may know this stuff very well too. I just know Robert always has these numbers at his fingertips. So please do chime in. But how long can this go before recovery this year from an economic perspective becomes problematic? If this is my sense is if this lasts into April, people can still have an okay year. If it lasts into June, things get much tougher. If it lasts into August, we're kind of screwed. But from your perspective and what you've seen, for history, do you have a feel for that? Is that something you
well, yeah.
To?
And I've been talking to some equity analysts, hopefully not contributing to the whip sign of the markets. But
it was you.
Yeah, no. I'm trying to say, just here.
Damn you! I was planning to retire next week, and now I can't. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it depends day to day. You never know if you time it right. But the challenges, what I started off was like, once you get new cases down to 0, then it's like 90 days to recover kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and if it's small, it's like, okay, it's isolated over here. So you're kind of like in the Chinese market. That's what it's looking like now. The challenge for me, and I think I had given the link of there's a site that just has like the daily stats, and it's just a number of charts. I'll throw up that link as well. The challenge is you look at the growth curve for China and how it was kind of growing. Now you look at the cases outside of China, and it's exhibiting exactly the same growth rate, with the big problem. I mean, the Chinese use some pretty draconian measures it's basically social isolation, right? If we can keep the people apart, this is not good, but
my personal favorite story about that, by the way, sorry, just to
go ahead.
We live in a dystopian future at times. Was the fact that they were using drones to patrol villages.
Oh yeah.
And if they spotted people outside, they were taking their picture, and the police would come and visit them and stuff. That's fairly.
Oh yeah.
That feels a little like Logan's Run or something.
And my understanding is in some towns it was like you could go out once a week, and I think it was kind of like scheduled, like you could go to the market, and and again there's supply chain things, making sure there aren't runs on grocery store. But then at one point they stopped that, and they just said, nope, sorry, you're skipping, this is not your day. Right? Your day didn't come this week.
You get to go outside on a day that doesn't end in Y.
Exactly. So that's tough. That's not going to play well in the U.S. Right? And so you got these people
going Western Europe, or
right. Yeah. I would say probably plays well and better in Western Europe than in the U.S.
Sure.
Because there are people like, hey, here's how you can get around this, and I've seen little articles how to avoid getting quarantined and how to do. It's like, well, if you've been exposed and are sick, maybe that's the best alternative. Do something for society instead of just and again, people are going, it's not that bad. You probably if you aren't older and don't have lung problems, you won't have a problem. Don't worry about it. That's really scary. It's really scary stuff. So my gut feeling is it's going to get worse, much worse before it gets better. There was an article from Sequoia, the big venture capital firm, that came out and said, watch out. They were not bullish by any stretch of the imagination. It was,
and I apologize,
it was pretty ugly.
Question the wrong way. I'm not looking for a prediction on how long will this go. I'm saying if new cases fall to zero at 2 weeks from now. Right. Let's be super optimistic.
That's not happening.
Of course not. But play along for purposes of the question. Okay.
Yeah.
Then most travel companies could probably still salvage a decent year out of this year. If new cases were to fall to zero within the next couple of weeks, I'm not saying they'd have the best year ever, but they'd be fine-ish. If new cases fall to zero in October, obviously they're doomed. Right.
Right. And,
for a lot
and
of
I
reasons.
think that's more likely.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah, that's probably the more likely case. Yeah.
That's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, at what point, where do we hit that point of no return where you can't salvage your year? Where you can't. You know what I mean? Like when do cases have to fall to zero where the travel industry is just screwed for all of 2020? You see what I mean? That's really.
Yeah, that's.
Because
if you're really looking at like
I would be encouraging people to pay attention to is what's your year going to look like, and when does it become a point where we have to think about other alternatives to figure out how do we make our year, or how do we not go out of business before the end of the year, whatever right?
Right.
Yeah, I would think by like in mid Q2, if this hasn't turned around, you're going to lose the rest of your year.
Yeah. I look at business cycle more than calendar year. I'm thinking that for the booking window for the summer season, if we don't have clarity as to the expectations of what this means to being able to travel, then you're going to find a lot of families that are just either going to reconnoiter what they're going to do into a smaller scale, or just simply, as you said, it's not your day that ends in Y. They're not going to go and do anything. They're going to say, out of abundance of caution of the uncertainties. These are the same people that don't buy Corona beer and think that brown chocolate milk comes from brown cows. So
No. If you put a lime, we've discussed this. If you put a lime in the neck of the Corona
Calico
beer
Brown,
bottle,
the
you will
Calico
not get coronavirus from that beer.
It's
the
not
lime
about the
counter-
lime. The alcohol kills it to start with. That's
That's
really the
right.
thing. If we're wiping everything
Everybody
down with
knows that.
alcohol, you got to wipe down your insides with alcohol.
Actually, Stephen Colbert had a great monologue a couple days ago, and he was talking about that, like without. He goes, well, and he reaches over and he had like a scotch or something like that. He's like, okay, so there we go.
Great,
But
minds
you know,
think alike.
Yep.
in this Navigate conference I was just at, there was how to maintain revenue strategy during a down demand,
Yeah,
which was an
yeah.
interesting conversation. And you know that we're going to be doing the summit at the beginning of April now about this stuff. But somebody that I knew from the Florida market, and I am with names, but his name's Frank. He's with an ownership group, and he did give one lesson we learned both in 9/11, 2001 for 9/11 with the anthrax virus. Because remember, Florida got double hit.
Yeah,
9/11 and anthrax.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we got the double delay on what to do because this landed and nobody knew what to do and whether these envelopes were going everywhere and all this other stuff. So, and 9/11 and that time is more reminiscent of this, where it wasn't about the ability financially to travel. It was the preference not
It
to.
was the fear of travel. That's right.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's more similarity between 9/11 and now than it is between the 08 crisis and so
Yeah.
forth. And the lessons that were learned in the Orlando market and in most of the Florida markets were go fast on your cut now. The
Right.
faster you can maintain cash flow,
Sure.
make your hard cuts now financially.
But
you
don't cut marketing,
Right.
and don't cut rate.
Right. You're not lowering your rate and you're not cutting your strategy for exposure. You're
Correct.
cutting your costs.
Correct.
This is the time
Correct.
to evaluate your entire cost structure.
Correct.
Are you, because we've all been kind of, and the analogy I give in my conversation is, most of the people that are in charge of management right now is like the pilot that knows how to fly the plane, but the plane's only been flying up in the air. It's never landed yet. He doesn't know how to land the plane.
Right.
Most of our management, 64% of our management in the industry right now have never worked in a down economy.
That's right.
They don't know how to land the plane. So
on the topic of cutting costs, Lauren, it might also be reallocating costs, like what South Korea is doing with having those drive-through
That's
check-in points. Like,
absolute
when you
genius.
drive up, because it will cost to have the supplies as well as the labor to manage that whole thing.
That's right.
right.
So you might have
Yes.
to put more in.
Yeah, but to answer towards you, what you're saying, Tim, is this is now when these discussions need to be going on.
Yeah. No,
These
that's a
are the
great
things
point.
that need to be put onto the table of what's our durability.
Yep.
And it's funny because one of the things I want to put into the summit is exactly something that we learned out of 2001 is stress testing your budget.
Yeah.
Take your budget and do three different things. One, either degrade it by 10% increments on your occupancy, or two, remove channels of contribution.
Yeah.
And three, start taking your operational costs per percentage based on those and determining what you would have to do in scale to mitigate those levels of business. And
Right.
that's stress testing your budget.
Well, and take your worst rooms out of service, right? Even if you don't have the money to renovate them right now, unless you're full up, take them out of service. Stop selling them, right? Close them out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Seriously.
that creates immediate internal compression.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yep.
And you lower your housekeeping cost, you lower your maintenance cost. Incrementally, but it's gonna help. Also,
Right.
the other great lesson from 9/11, as much as I hate to say that as a phrase, is focus on drive market.
Yes.
Absolutely.
As I was reciting what I used to do back in the time, people are still unfortunately passing away. People are still getting married, and people are still buying homes. So there are core business travel requirements that still exist,
That's
and
right.
medical is another one of them. And obviously, we looked at it from our marketing parts of view as proximity to hospitals that are handling this stuff. Whether there's need, because it's not just one person that gets sick,
Right.
It's one person's family that gets sick. The
Right.
person that's being treated and the people that are supporting. And this creates a whole different dynamic and so forth. And again, we're in the hospitality business, so we're providing accommodations. We're innkeepers at heart, for whatever the reason of their travel. So we have to be mindful of being what are still the core ones. You see these companies that, and I don't know whether this is really required. They're stopping people from traveling. These moratoriums. Do you find that there's a real value to that? I mean, there's a legal value to them because they're not putting themselves like Bob got sick because he was forced to
You
travel.
mean conferences or businesses?
Well, a lot of companies with non-essential
are
travel.
putting 6-week moratoriums out. Don't travel for business. We're not traveling anybody for business.
Sure.
Some conferences lost people just even though they were driving to it. I was talking to a young lady over at the conference.
Absolutely.
the
Well, there's
entire company was driving to the hotel for the conference.
Right.
There's
Well,
a,
they
yeah,
can
but
go.
there's a I mean there's a liability situation, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
There is a lost labor productivity portion of
Yeah.
this, right? And
There's
there's a
corporate social responsibility.
corporate social responsibility,
Yeah.
and you have the situation of the travel industry is not the only industry that's seeing some impacts when you have problems with supply chain and things along those lines. So it is also a cost cutting measure, and it's
True.
and as
Absolutely.
much as it impacts the travel industry, and I hate to see it, it's probably a smart cost cutting measure as opposed to, hey, let's take 10% of the workforce and lay them off.
Right.
I'd much rather they cut travel. I hate to, I despise saying that, but I'd rather the economy keep going by having full employment than
Yeah.
unemployment spiking dramatically.
On, and one of the articles Robert shared on Amman and that amazing looking resort, it mentions in there when they're on their off season, what they'd like to do is utilize their space for training, further
Yeah.
training. So if conventions, conferences are what's being cut, that means you'll have your conference space. You'll have, those rooms and so on that may lend themselves to small meetings. Maybe utilize that on how you could train your staff on different ways of implementing things, either with guests or even internally. This isn't a, hey, read a memo and make it happen. Ongoing training is really what's going to allow this to get through and be effective.
Do you think it's too early for hotels to start putting into their dialogue the awareness of sensitivity of the concerns of their arriving guests and what the hotel is doing to help mitigate those concerns? Like, we have hand sanitation, we're retraining our housekeeping staff to be more attentive to cleaning, blah, blah, blah. Is it too early or
I don't think it's too early. I think it's a question of how you approach it, right?
Uh-huh.
I think it's very I don't think it's ever a bad time to say, look, we take your well-being seriously. If you are, if there's anything we can do to make you feel more comfortable with I don't think you're ever wise to focus on cleanliness, but if there's anything we can do to make you feel more comfortable with the accommodations while you're here, let us know. We'll be more than happy to take care of that. You may notice some changes in service. Our room service waiters and waitresses are going to be wearing gloves or something, like whatever it is.
Right.
But call out the things that are going to be obvious. And say, hey, you know what? We have a 0 tolerance sick day policy. So if somebody comes in and they're not feeling well, we send them home. So service might be a little slower than what you're accustomed to. Things like that. But I will tell you, nothing makes me feel skeevier in a hotel room ever than those sanitary remote controls. This might be a personal thing, but it's like, well, thanks for pointing out a thing that I never wanted to think about ever.
Yeah.
I don't know that you want to draw attention to the germ-ridden surfaces in the
Yes,
room.
our germ-ridden surfaces are now 20% less germ-ridden.
Right.
99.9.
Right. So I think it's how you message it matters a lot. Definitely address the elephant in the room. But
I
don't think
would
it's too soon
say
to do that.
I would say adopt the best practice. Make sure you're doing the right thing for your employees. Do all those things, and then probably develop like an FAQ internally, so everybody knows here's what they're doing. If a guest asks and things like that, then you can explain.
I'm so sorry for laughing, Robert. I apologize, but I'm just
That's
picturing,
okay.
You gotta love when you talk to the one person at the hotel and they're like, "Oh yeah, man, we got like 12 people out sick. It's really gross." Like I've had that happen, and you're just going, "Don't say that to people. Just don't say that to people." I was in a restaurant once, and one of the people was complaining about, "Oh, we got so many people. Like the flu's been going around and stuff," and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm good. I'm not going to actually have my food.
Yeah.
No to-go box.
No to-go box. Yeah. I'm gonna swing back
sous chef,
and sous chefs on my way home.
Yeah, but at least the sous chef's in there, even though he has that really weird rash.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
The glove covers it. It's okay.
Yeah. But I literally had that experience not that long ago, before the coronavirus thing. But it was so funny when you said have FAQs. I'm like, oh my God, do I have the perfect negative case study for you on this?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Lauren, you were asking about let's look at what Sequoia recommended, right? Because Sequoia is not this reactionary, let's get, bent out of shape and overreact, but they're saying number one, cash runway, what is that's a huge
Yep.
important
Yep.
important thing. You run out of cash, everything stops.
Yeah.
Now, because again, they're focused
Pretty
on
much by definition, actually.
yeah on fundraising, because again, they're focusing in the VC space. What happened? But again, they pointed out, they said, Airbnb, Square, Stripe, all these companies were really born out of the global financial crisis, right? So there's an opportunity when things are down, and
Right.
to go start new things. Sales forecasts. Even if you don't see a direct or immediate exposure, anticipate your customers may revise their spending. Certain deals may not be certain. Don't get caught flat-footed. Marketing, this is an interesting one. With softening sales, you might find that your customer lifetime values have declined, in turn suggesting the need to rein in customer acquisition spending to maintain consistent returns on marketing spending, right? So they're saying, tamp it down. And again, these are investors, right?
No, I get that. I get that. So I'm going to push back on that one for a second.
The last thing was actually added on that. They said you might even want to consider raising the bar on ROI for marketing spend. Right.
There you go. There you go. So that's the part I want to push back on, because I want people to make sure they take the correct message from this. Twofold. One, remember, these are folks who invest in companies and look for a 10x return within 3 to 5 years.
For themselves, yes.
For themselves. So their timeline is very different than, a hotel operators, right? So let's be very clear about where their incentives lie. The second thing is, I absolutely would suggest, you may want to focus your marketing where you're putting the dollars towards the places with the greatest ROI and the like, and you're being very judicious about where you're spending your marketing dollars. Right. But there have been a lot of studies that show the businesses that cut their marketing during downturns. This happened during 9/11. It happened during 2001, 2008, 2009. It has happened in other short-term disruptions. Are the companies who struggle both during the downturn and when times get better.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Right. Because now your competition is lapping you while that's going on.
You've dug yourself a hole, and then when this ends, the first thing you have to do is climb out of the hole.
Correct. Right.
And based on increasing or focusing on drivable traffic, I guess it's back to those billboards, folks.
That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, do look at things. One of the more interesting studies, and one of the more interesting studies that I've seen about this topic, Smith Travel Research, Mark Lomano from Smith and some folks from Cornell did a pretty good study a few years back that I linked to in the post that I did on Hospitality Net, that basically showed one of the places that actually had a above average return on spend, and Lauren is going to, his head is going to explode in a second, but was franchise fees. And the reason behind it that I think is true, they didn't dig into it to this level, but is you get a multiplier effect, right? Because it's not just your marketing, but you're also getting the brand is doing things at the same time, where a lot of independents, and especially smaller independents, probably were cutting their budgets to begin with and didn't have, couldn't put as much weight behind it as, you can get from a larger brand at that time, right?
Yeah.
So...
Yep. No,
anyway, I will get off my soapbox on that.
Oh no, they had two other things. One was head count, and they're saying this might be time to evaluate critically whether you can do more with less and raise productivity. Yikes. And capital spending. Until you have charted a course of financial independence, examine whether your capital spending plans are sensible. So basically, you read through the lines, they go, well, cut your capital spending, cut your head count, cut your marketing, look at your sales forecast. Watch out for runway and watch your cat, right? Which is
you're talking about from their perspective, from a ground level perspective. Here's, I think, some admonishments of some things you can take.
Well, that's the investor perspective.
Yeah.
That's not the
Google,
what's good for the customers and things like that.
Google is not stopping its roadmap. It's going to continue to do what it's going to be doing.
Absolutely.
If we listen to what we're talking about, yes, I completely agree, Tim, with you on the fact that this is the time to optimize your marketing to only going for the things that truly generate what you need from them, and maybe a little less on the, well, it was nice we're getting it, but we had enough money that we could bleed a little bit. We could run those things. You definitely have to tighten up your market strategy to have a higher threshold.
Focus on your better feeder markets, focus on drive markets, etc. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please.
Yeah, no, you're right. And to that end, I say this is where you need the sharper pencil to do these things. You need to be, instead of the spray and pray advertising that most people are doing. So this is going to be a shakedown for a lot of people that have been just riding the wave because everybody else was on the rave and the tide was high and the boats were high and everything's good. Well, now it's not. And for the people that are much more in tune with where their business is coming from and much more in tune with what the yieldabilities of what they're doing, this is where they're going to shine. And this is the chance to really claim a lot of ground in your market by market share and voice. And this is where I'll go counter to what you said, Tim, about the franchise effect. They're also walking just big club to swat to fly on a wall with this. They're having to pull everybody along with them. Now, that momentum helps everybody, but it also is very untargeted and not really concise. It's not as good as it should be. Let's put it that way.
Well, of course not. Of course not. However, I'm going to defend the brands for a second because I worked at brands during 2001, 2002, and that 2008, 2009, two very different brands. And we had task forces inside the company where every single week we were saying, these are our crisis hotels and what can we do to help these folks as best we can? You are absolutely right. When I worked at Wyndham Ascendant in 2001, 2002, we had 7,500 hotels. We could not do something for every single one of those 7,500 hotels every single day. We couldn't. We absolutely couldn't. We could say, boy, here's a market that's really getting slaughtered. And what can we do to try to help that market? So did we do as much as was needed? No. Did we do as much as we were able to help as many franchisees as we could? Absolutely. And I feel pretty confident saying I suspect that's true because remember, the franchisees are our customers, right? If they don't see the value they're getting from the brand, they're going to go be a franchisee for somebody else or go independent. So it was in our vested interest to try to help where we could.
True. But I would say to that end also that, you had a small toolbox. Because there was only certain tools.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay, where independence and so forth, we can have a master.
I don't know who told you, by the way. I'm a little. I don't want that getting out, really.
Mum's the word. But the ability to have multiple tools and the capability of using them in a very precise way is going to be a very strong suit for those that have built this up for it. I would also slightly venture off the capital expenditure potential also, because if you're strategic in being able to capture more than your fair share of market because of doing better at getting your market share for the demand that's there, it might be the opportunity to take advantage of going over and improving your inventory quality. I know you have to have a lot of financial factors in place. Okay. If you don't have the funding, you don't have the war chest, then no, your advice is excellent. But if you have the ability to, as you said, take rooms out of service at this time. Take the effort to go over and do some things for it. Perhaps make your own internal compressions, but take this time to kind of like in the middle of a battle where you have the chance to pause and reload and get ready for the next thing. This might be that pause that you get that you can actually improve your product quality, improve your market share, where others are kind of floundering as to what they're doing. And I've seen this firsthand. Like I said, watching these people in the market, the first thing they're doing is the thing they said they'd never do again, and they're doing it again. They're lowering the rates and throwing even this TDCs and the tourist development councils are sending out memos telling the hotels this is the time to invest in their Expedia ads. I kid you not.
Right.
It's really seriously. Right. You're telling them that they're going to dump rate for spring break is their motto.
That's right.
Literally.
That's which is terrible advice. Obviously,
it is terrible advice.
Of course. I'll tell you a funny story. And the people at the hotel told us they were lucky, not good. Leading hotels of the world, we held our holiday party at the New York Palace in 2008, and we were in their grand ballroom. We had a very lovely evening, etc. in December of 2008, and we were the last event being held there that year because they were closing their doors on Christmas Eve for a massive year-long renovation. Right?
Yep.
And they said we are the luckiest people in history.
Right.
Because they had built up capital. They had planned to shut down for a year to do a massive renovation of the inside the place. And it just so happened to coincide with the worst market anybody, the economy basically falling into a crater. They weren't good. they were lucky.
Right.
Yeah.
And they acknowledged they were lucky, but they were super lucky because they'd already planned to be sitting out the worst economy anybody'd ever seen, most of us had ever seen.
Yeah.
But it was a strong lesson in if you can take rooms out of service, if you can take parts of the property that need work, now is the time to do them if you have the capital on hand. If you don't, take them out of service anyway,
Right.
because why give the guests who are coming a crap experience? Give them the best experience you can possibly afford to give them and put them in your very best rooms.
Right.
Try to upsell the people who are coming. And if they don't, try to upsell the people who are coming. And if they can't upsell them, give it to them for free anyway. It's sitting empty, and they'll tell people they had a great time despite the fact of X and Y and Z, and you'll get some positive word of mouth. I mean, it's going to sit empty anyway. May as well get what you can out of it.
Well, it's like anything. You grab it and you're like, oh, I'll use it only on a special occasion. Then it ends up expiring because you never used it for a special occasion. I mean, we travel to Europe a lot. We always get these, food things. Oh, this is special occasion stuff. And then we go to use it. It's like, it's expired. We waited too long. So now it's like we get it. We eat. No, we're eating it now. Heck no, we're not going to be. And that's, like you said, those rooms, they're great rooms. Why not? Because now the real value, you look at the triad of what Google's looking for with the link building and so forth, that revenue process in the Google/travel is powerful.
By the way,
reviews are, go ahead.
No, can I tell you my favorite conspiracy theory of the week? And I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, but I'm gonna start one right now.
Oh, good.
Okay? No, I had a brainstorm the other day. This is either brilliant or the stupidest thing you're ever going to hear, and I fully acknowledge either of those are a possibility.
My day starts like that all the time, so don't worry.
Exactly. Yep.
So Facebook canceled its F8 conference. Twitter said nobody's going to South by Southwest. Lots and lots and lots of companies are restricting travel, except for absolutely necessary travel. In some cases, they're restricting all travel, right? Google has restricted travel to China, to Korea, to Northern Italy, and I'm forgetting somebody obvious, someplace else where there's been a fairly major outbreak.
Iran,
right? Yep. Okay. That's where they're restricting travel. Anybody remember Google Flu Trends?
Oh, yeah.
Google Flu Trends was the website that they had where they could tell by what people were searching where flu was likely to be, reaching outbreak levels, because people were complaining about fever and chills and whatever.
Looking up stuff, yeah.
They were looking up stuff. So they had a really good sense of where flu was actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Google is restricting travel to China, Korea. Oh, Japan was one of them. Japan.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Northern Italy and Iran.
Huh.
I'm just saying, maybe Google knows something we don't.
That'd be a first, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Conspiracy theory, go.
Now, Stuart's not here because he's under the weather. And he was. I felt so bad for him. I saw him at Navigate because he was still trying to get over it. And he had just literally the flu. His whole family got the flu. So, one gets it, all gets it, that kind of thing. Of course. And of course, he has to travel. And he had 2 presentations to make stuff. But I recorded his presentation. It rocked.
He does a great job.
He did an awesome job. And I'm not going to share
the accent. It's that Australian accent.
Well, he's also got the swagger.
I find it irresistible.
Actually, okay, true story. An Australian thought he was from New Zealand, and I kid you not, we're going to put him on
That's great. The man without a country.
I thought he was a Kiwi. He's like, "Hey, you Kiwi?" He's like, "No." Anyway,
that's hysterical.
Yeah, but he gave us some great stuff about how Google was going to take over the world, and he gave great numbers. And the biggest thing he pointed out was the fact that over 95%. And I'm not going to sell into his thunder because he has great numbers through all of his deck. 95% of all searches are done by Google. And business wise, we're already at between 50 and 60. Between 60 and 70% of all business for hospitality is in some way connected to Google. Mm-hmm. And it keeps going up by 10% every time he, by month sort of thing that he's going through. He has better, he can be much more accurate about his descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there was a great piece on FocusWire today about the fact that They went through the annual reports from Booking.com and Expedia, as they do each year, and that Expedia and Booking Holdings dispersed a record $11 billion on marketing in 2019, with the vast majority of that going to
it's like
Google.
90% or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
another true story to this. At the end of it, when people were coming up trying to get his autograph and kiss his hand and have him kiss their babies, and
which is a good thing to do with a guy who's just had the flu.
I was like,
But anyway.
right, yeah. So one woman came up and she says, "I didn't know if you knew about this Google Hotel bookings survey." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And as she's describing it, her hotel ownership group got reached out to Google, where they're tracking the bookings. And offering bookings as through Google as well for them, in comparison to, and she gets the report from Google of the OTA bookings. So they're already in the methodology process of determining where is that critical threshold where we don't need to take, we're going to take over where the OTAs are at. They already have.
Right.
I mean, the numbers he was showing about the growth of Google's booking, versus the OTAs and so forth. There is that magic point that we were talking about where the money that they're getting from the OTAs isn't worth it anymore, and they're going to stop and just take over what they're doing because they now can make more money than doing it themselves.
That's absolutely correct. By the way, there was if you pay attention to their earning calls and things like that, Alphabet's earning call this year was really fascinating, as it ever is. They talk about some really interesting stuff. But let's see. We generated overall 80.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I actually had a hard stop. I had to. I did want to throw into the conspiracy. What is China doing with that data from Experian?
That's
there you go.
What is happening with all of that?
Nothing good.
Probably nothing good. All right, Kat, since you have to go, where can people find you and everything? Thank you for being here, but where can they find you if they want to know more?
Yes, and sorry to interrupt, but Kat Muhammad, you can reach me at kat.m.speaks@gmail.com. If not, check me out here on Fridays, 11:30 Eastern Standard Time for digital marketing. Or check me at AHOA or on LinkedIn. Where you guys see my fun posts and occasionally cute pictures of my baby.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah, she gets high views when she's on there.
I love her smile. Honest to God, she the pictures you have with her when she's smiling.
Radiant.
Brilliant smile.
You're very lucky, Kat.
And she lost 2 teeth in the past 2 months. So right here is super cute. But
that's adorable.
It is.
It's a pleasure being on the show, and I look forward to chatting with you folks, the audience, as well as my co-hosts next week. So have a great day.
Thanks, Kat.
Being here. Have a great rest of the day.
So Google said Alphabet, we generated roughly overall 83% of total revenues from the display of ads in 2019. Roughly 61% of total revenues came from Google search alone. But here's where things get really interesting. People access, these are quotes, people access the internet through a growing variety of devices such as desktop computers, mobile phones, smartphones, laptops and tablets, video game consoles, voice-activated speakers, wearables, automobiles, and television streaming devices. They also said, in addition, search queries are increasingly being undertaken via voice-activated speakers, apps, social media, and other platforms. We've seen an increase in YouTube engagement ads. This is where things start to get really fascinating, which monetize at a lower rate than traditional search ads, right? Basically, mobile growth is slowing. Google's growth from search ads is slowing, not because they're not doing a great job monetizing it, but because everybody already searches. And they're already getting every dollar out of the searches that are happening that they could possibly get.
Right.
They said, rats, I lost my place in this. Basically, they said they invest. Here we go. We see new verticals beginning to grow as well, supplementing the content that you see on YouTube. They said there, but he meant on YouTube, with other types of accessorizing, be it merchandising, ticket sales, etc. Brand advertising is growing at a healthy pace and remains the largest component of YouTube ads, but direct response is growing and continues to grow at a very substantial rate. In direct response, we're letting brands insert a tailored call to action in a video ad, such as signing up for a newsletter or scheduling an appointment or downloading an app or booking a trip. Right? And they said, we put headcount behind the areas we're investing for the long term. And then they went on at some length about on commerce. I'm really excited Bill Reddy is here. He brings a lot of experience. And you mentioned the transactional part of the funnel. And I think that's an area where he brings a lot of experience, given his prior work. Improve the overall user experience. People are interested in something. How do you make it more seamless to complete the transaction, and bringing in deep partnerships with merchants and retailers to make that happen?
Yes.
And that's where we are investing, said Sundar Pichai. Right.
And
so
since Amazon has a lot of the retail stuff locked up and left travel completely vacant, what's the easiest spot to enter?
Right? And you're going to see a lot of innovation, changes to the product in YouTube and Maps and their other properties for them to continue to drive their growth. And so it seems pretty likely that they're saying out loud that that's where they're going to be investing to drive travel ads. I thought, by the way, you're spot on, Robert. You could not be more right when you talk about their who's got the target on their back with Amazon. I had another note in here specifically about the fact of how many times they mention, Apple and Facebook and folks like that in their annual report, and it's a couple times each. And how many times they mention Amazon? It's like every other sentence.
Exactly. Hey, you guys, what percentage of Google's total revenue, we aren't talking ad revenue, total revenue does the travel industry represent?
About 11%.
That's of advertising revenue, which is a lot of it. It's 9%.
Okay, but I was going to say 90% of the revenue is advertising revenue. Right. So 90% of the 11.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, that's a staggeringly huge number.
Yeah. I do want to pay attention. We've been talking about the external factors to our industry. The coronavirus and the impression of travel and so forth. And these do definitely have their effect, and we've made those clear. There is a revolution of sorts that's not getting noticed as to the transformation of how we consume our and so forth. Sure. If you, for all of us as old as we are, remember back
Hey.
we were the channel change.
I'm a lot younger than both of you guys.
It was channel 3 or channel 6 or channel 11, and every time Dad wanted the channel change, you cut up, you change the little dial, and then you had to move the amp, But how we consume stuff has always been under the auspice that, there's these broadcasts and there's the channels and there's the big traditionalists, and then we get into the cable and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not trying to go through the whole history of this, but this fragmentation of digestible content now, this ability to say that YouTube has its own combinations, and AT&T has its own TV. They bought DirecTV, and they have their own distributions, and Xfinity, and on and on and on. Roku, and all these things. We're consuming it, but what hasn't changed from perspective, but is changing by consumption, is the value proposition of a website. Because we always looked at it that we had everything had to be in this big pot. Our website had to have everything. And what you're pointing out, Tim, by how they're focusing on YouTube and consumables is sometimes the conversion of somebody to purchase something has no touch to the site. We see that from Google Zero. We see it from everything else. But now I can watch a video, and the video is of my hotel being near something, and I get excited about it. And here's my action item on the video. I might decide to actually just stay at that hotel from the exposure that the video created.
That's absolutely correct.
Without ever going to the site for affirmation of let me go check that out now. We're still doing it. I'm not saying this is now going to, they say it's happening, but it's a slow progression of changing our methodology of consumption.
So this is a thing that I've been talking about for a long time, about you don't want to think about your website. You want to think about your web presence.
Yes.
Right? And the metaphor that I've used for years, and it fell out of favor for a couple of years with other people, but I've been like, no, you'll come back. And I think I've been proved right on this, is this idea of hub and spoke, right? Mm-hmm. And the hub is your website.
Right.
But the spoke is any channel that actually drives to any action you're looking for. Often you want that action to be to bring people to the hub, but it could be if you can transact there and transact in an economical way, then you absolutely want to do that, right? I'm
looking at it from the idea that the new iteration is more like a honeycomb. Facebook can have its own existence for you whenever the website shall pass, and it can be as strong as a conversion value. By also same token, YouTube can be its own conversion value. By same token,
Of course.
Pinterest and so forth. That it's not about having. We've marketed in the idea that we expose and then translate, as you said,
It's a linear,
yeah, and it's not. It can be. I can get all of what I need on the platform.
Agreed, by the way, completely agreed. I think what we call it is a semantic debate. We're saying the same thing.
Yes. Like I said, right now it's a hub and spoke. It is. Everything goes to the central source mostly. These are channels of distribution. Well,
I'm not saying it has to go to the hub. I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting it must go to the hub.
Right.
I'm saying you have a hub because you have a place where you want people to come to. You also have the spokes that you take advantage of when they're there, right? Yeah. So it's not that they must come to the hub. It's that the hub is always the authoritative source of truth.
We were just semantics, but I'm saying, But people where they're falling down is they feel like they still have to. Like all these things drive them to the hub, and that's not how you need to keep thinking. You need to keep thinking, to your point, that each of them can do their own value without having to drive that business.
That's correct. That's exactly. Yeah, we're saying the same thing. For sure.
But you little things like there's a platform called Brandzuka. I've gotten great success with that because now it's so easy to make videos, and this Brandzuka really will put them on channels, TV channels. And when I say TV channels, I mean if you're a cord cutter or something like this, and you've signed up for AT&T TV or Roku TV or Slingbox or all these ones. You ever see those times where they have this pause for commercial and it's just blank? Because they're not going to run a commercial that they didn't get paid for off of whatever the feed is that they're feeding you, whether it's HGTV or whatever. They're not going to run what they get money from. Well, you can buy those spots,
right?
On Brandzuka, and
that's awesome. That's fantastic.
World, it was all the remnants, right? That was the big.
Yeah, that used to be remnant purchases. That's right. With radio, TV, remnant purchases. Well, now you can do it with this Brandzuka stuff, and then going to another point you made, Tim. When you're talking about influencers, and Robert, you did a phenomenal presentation.
I love that presentation.
Influence was just crazy good. People forget that there is incredible influencers on YouTube. Most of them are kids, granted. But
actually, I think we're the really cool, and you're right. But a cool place. And first, you're absolutely right on YouTube. You're absolutely right. But you're starting to see it with Twitch in a big way, and you're starting to see it with TikTok in a big way too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're seeing that there's people that you can bring in. And again, and Robert, like you did phenomenal on explaining the real mechanics of what you need to define when you're dealing with influencers contractually and so forth. And I'm not going to take thunder from it, but you have to translate that. You just can't say, please come on. It's not like a fam trip used to be, come on, show up. You give them the world just hoping to do something nice for you. Now it's like, no, I need this. This is how much I want for this, is what I want to expose for this. And I think, you added one more comment. Make sure that whatever you have them do, that they do it from what guests can actually acquire, not from the I'm looking it up in the presidential suite. Look at me throw big dollar bills around with no. It's show them a real room, show them a real the real event.
Show them an experience. Well, show them a really cool experience, and then If you would you like to do this too?
Right.
Well, yeah, it's possible, and it might not be exactly the same, or you might be able to get upgrade or something. Right. But you can do this kind of stuff is good
because early on people with influencers they put them in the presidential suite and they do the whole you watch these travel shows and they're based like this. They're in the best room possible, doing the most expensive things capable. Talking about how cool it is to be there. It's not like it's unattainable, but it's not for the common user.
Right.
The better impact ones are not those now as it is. This is all the cool stuff you can do as any generic guest.
Right. Well, you get the dive. And you have influencers like the dive-ins and drive-ins type. The dives and drive-ins type thing. And you go, try saying that. It's interesting. The whole influencer marketing. My daughter's now. That is now her job, right? She's like an assistant to these people, so she's not an influencer, but she's now like the engine who's helping these folks. And it's amazing. She just signed up a new client who, a very well established, A-list celebrity makeup artist, right? From Houston, who's older. I think has 1,500 Facebook or Instagram followers. I just zero. doesn't like social media, and I think I can't remember how my daughter got connected to it, but it's going to be amazing just because this person, wealth of knowledge, experience, really good, really personal, and my daughter's just going to kind of go, you can let people know about this and these things that you kind of do, and all of a sudden it's going to be life changing for this person, and this person's already well established and doing great, doing great stuff. But it's amazing because it's legitimate quality, right? I mean, if they are doing a good job, and I think for a lot of the casual, like, we're really cool, let's get a selfie influencer type thing that's just kind of benefiting the influencer, that's going to start falling off. And the ones that are going to be really good are the ones of, hey, I'm an expert in Greece or Macedonian or whatever.
Absolutely.
Here's how you plug in,
or I know
destination.
the very best restaurants in Greece. It's the very best. I know where you can get this is going to sound like really random, but I know where you can get the very best, like, Ethiopian food in Greece. Like, they're
that's sort of that, either destination based, or it's the same as quality niche travel agents, right?
Yeah, that's
either they're destination focused, or they're, hey, if you're a Hollywood A-list celebrity or a high-end VC, I can help you travel much more efficiently with less friction and whatever. Or you're trying to do things cheap, really efficiently, right?
Let me bounce a couple ideas off you that are. So I'm dealing with a potential client, and what their product is they do customized videos for pre-arrivals. And they're able to drop in insertions of people's names and dates of their arrival and so forth and so on. The first generation of this that they're providing is relatively generic. It's more building the excitement, anticipation of the arrival, things that to be considered of. Make sure you make your spa appointments, because arriving and making it is bad, because usually they're already sold out at that point. Stuff like that. And eventually they want to curate it even to be more concise, that it's tailored to the type of travel that they're going for, which is family or romantic or anything. And then they want to go past that in their roadmap decisions, that it's going to turn into trying to tailor specific to their dates there. The things while they're there, they
absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
And so I think it's really cool for it that they're going that direction with it. The other, and this goes back to my trip to New York, and you've seen this probably, Tim, for what you do more than I have. Everybody's got a freaking podcast. I mean, when I was in New York, the local news people are like, and this is our broadcast episode, but we'll continue our live streaming, and you can always catch me on my podcast. Every announcer had a podcast. And then I see everywhere advertisements of people with podcasts. So one of my original things I was going to do with one of my hotels was I was going to create a podcast, a weekly or bi-weekly, depending upon the use value of it, of what to be anticipating coming to, and adding it to their pre-arrival aspect. Where it's like, hey,
there could be a lot of value in that, for sure.
That's right. Yeah, if you understand your client and you're giving them relevant information for them. And if you're just giving them, if you're reading
generic,
that doesn't work.
But obviously, if I'm going to because I'm going to try to do it for a Vancouver property, there's events every day in Vancouver. And granted, we're in different circumstances at that particular moment, but there are always these festivals and things and so forth, while the weather is more temperate for them. That are coming up. Springtime is a big thing. And so I was thinking about trying to pilot that as an idea for that market, where we do those kind of, hey, you're arriving the first 2 weeks of April, and blah, blah, blah is going on, and blah, blah, blah is going on. And this is, and how close it is to the hotel, or what can you do, whatever have you. I was thinking about trying to do that. So, cool.
It could be really valuable. I want to talk about two things real quick that are very related to this. So first off, I want to respond directly to what you said. I've been looking for a very specific piece, and I can't find it, but I found one of my earlier references to this hub and spoke model that I've talked about in having a web presence, and it dates back to 2011 at the latest, in 2009, even before that, right? But to give you a sense of how long ago this was, and I apologize for citing something from so long ago, but this was the former CEO of MySpace who said, but think about this quote, right? He said,
Tom?
No, this was Michael Jones. This was the guy, this was the adult in the room who brought it, whose job was to turn MySpace into an actual business. But he did say, quite rightly, a single front door equals a single point of failure. Many large internet businesses, such as MySpace and Yahoo, have a single brand front door in that users have one point of entry into the site. Behind the door, users will find multiple product lines. Unfortunately, a single front door means there's a single point of failure in consumers' minds, even when the product lines behind it are robust. So what you're describing, Lauren, when you're talking about the videos, when you're talking about, putting them on various channels, on social, what have you, of working with influencers, of creating a podcast, etc., is exactly how you avoid that problem, right? You're creating multiple front doors for your guests. And
easy to find.
And potentially a different front door for every segment of guest based on what their needs are, how they like to consume content, where they like to find information. Do they prefer to listen to stuff while they're driving in their car or working out in their, on the treadmill or something along those lines? Do they prefer to sit at home at night on their phone and watch videos on their tablet or their phone? Right? You're giving them a variety of ways to encounter your information. Hang with me for 1 second. I apologize. I will then shut up and give you a chance. At the same time, the reason I keep hammering on hub and spoke, to go back to the semantic debate for 1 second, that I think is really important, is you also have to remember, for all those channels, I posted a link to a podcast I did last year called Stop Outsourcing Your Sales and Marketing to Gatekeepers Like Google, by which I did not mean don't use them. Right. And in the podcast, I make that very clear. You absolutely should use every front door that you can have available to you. Right. What you also want to remember is all of those additional front doors, somebody else controls the lock and can change the rules on you at any time.
Yep.
And the reason that I always hammer on hub and spoke and I push back on things like honeycombs or other things like that is when you don't own the door, somebody else gets to change the rules. And so you always also want to make sure that, you have that hub.
Oh, yeah. It's not an either or.
It's not an either or. It's an and. That's exactly right.
That was the old, you don't need a web page, just put it on Facebook.
Oh, dear God. Exactly.
Not such a great idea.
But that said, if somebody is going to give you access to their door, take advantage of it for as long as they will.
Oh yeah. Right. And just make sure that Facebook page you're putting stuff, you're cross-posting things from from your website, that sort of thing. That's fine.
So an interesting statistic. My audience for my podcast has grown a lot. Not to sound braggish or anything, but just the interesting.
Those regular purchases from Fiverr will help you do that.
Hey, on an audience,
he bought the subscription.
No, I just checked everybody. I'm like remember Steve Martin and the Jerk, $1.49. Anyway, so if you haven't built an Alexa skill yet for your podcast, Tim, you need to.
Yeah, I know. I haven't done it.
My contribution percentage of that is anywhere between as low as 42% and as high as 48% perpetually.
Yeah, it's on my list of things.
And even as Robert, you tried to boof me last week, and you were surprised as heck when you went on Google, and sure as heck, it plays it on Google.
I did. I actually did it with my device, and it came up. I was shocked. I would have lost a lot of money. Thank goodness.
Hold on. Let me see if this works. Alexa, play Thinks Out Loud. Crap. Alexa, stop. Please don't play that horrible, horrible song.
I was going to do Ed Sheeran, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But no, it's on Google Play, it's on Siri, it's on Alexa. All of them. You just have to say, hey Alexa, play Hospitality Marketing Podcast. And
maybe there's somebody I know who I can hire to do that for me.
I'll do it for you for freaking free, and you know that.
Lauren, we have to have a talk about how you market your own business.
Excellent negotiation skill.
Yeah.
Hey, friends, that door doesn't have a lock on it. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
But no, it's really been interesting that has been such a driving force, and it's not just U.S. I mean, my mix of countries that are listening to the podcast. I mean, U.S. is still predominant, yes, but not by huge amounts. It's pretty distributed. Ironically, I have, I guess, a fan base in Ireland a lot because there's a perpetual amount of play in Ireland. I'm like, well, dang, right. Yeah. So anyway,
I'm gonna look at countries for me. The U.S. is dominates by far. The U.S. is the lion's share. Eyeballing it, probably a third. Singapore, United Kingdom, Japan, Sweden, Germany. But by the way, full disclosure, Singapore is 30% the size of U.S. United Kingdom's about the same size as Singapore. Japan's about the same size. Then Sweden, Germany drop down a fair bit. Canada drops down a bit. Israel, France, and then others make up the last third. So yeah, ballpark.
Hey, I get my little notification feed here. This is scary stuff. Just to depress people on coronavirus. University of Washington moving all in-person classes to online, which is
really,
yep. So and Seattle's having problems. Actually, again, the kind of the joke for the upside for Seattle is traffic is great.
So maybe we should have.
It's just really Seattle is the northern Italy. I'm fearing of the U.S. Oh, one other one though, Johns Hopkins, who I think a lot of people respect for keeping track of this, bans fans from attending the Division III men's basketball tournament games the school is hosting. So they're hosting the Division III tournament. There are not going to be any fans in the arena.
Oh, that's.
I have to say, you know how people back in the old school of marketing, where you always had people that were the authority on types of purchases. Like you had a friend that always was geeky about electronics or geeky about cars or whatever. Yeah. And when you're going to buy something like that, you go, "Hey, Bob, you know all about cars. What car should I buy?" Well, I feel like I've turned into Geek Man broadcaster this past week. I've fielded more questions on how to broadcast, how to simulcast, what equipment to use to do any of that than I had in months of me running around going, "Hey, y'all should do this." And then nobody's talking to me. Now everybody wants to talk to me about it. I'm like, all righty then. Well, because you got to figure, and I think of this, what's this going to do to high tech? As you ask about where is the tipping point for our industry to make it a okay year, a bad year, or whatever, there's going to be tipping point decisions for conferences too. You're talking about people all coming to San Antonio. And it's going to be a big conference, as it always is. You got Rock right behind it with and that's in June.
Yeah.
So, okay, where is the tipping point where people are just going to say, "Yeah, not this year"?
Well, actually, I'm an executive advisor to HTNG, right? And so they have their HT Next conference, which certainly isn't anywhere as large as High Tech. And High Tech did cancel, and HTNG they canceled High Tech Europe, right? They pulled the plug on it completely, which made a lot of sense. But what they're basically saying now is they don't know, right? And so they've got the event set up for Phoenix. Everything's all fine and good. It's all planned, but they're playing it by ear. So now the decision is going to be whether you have the conference, which I think about 700 people or so, or do you still have like the executive advisory, because there's a whole bunch of strategy stuff we've been working on. Do you have the grouping of 30 people still go there, because it's that's a much more kind of less risky, more manageable number than 700, because again, a lot of this is how many people does it get spread to, and if you're exposed to more people, that's the risk factor.
Basically, you'll just be like the Iranian parliament, is what you're saying. You won't.
French parliament got it too. Yeah, I mean it's better. They have a cabinet minister in France who has it. I mean that's scary stuff. So
well, you look at this as there has to be considerations, I would think, of fallback procedures that said, "Hey, look, let's do a combination potentially of virtual and those that still physically attend." To your point, where they may downscale it to reduce the risk, but they still want the exposure on a grand level. Remember when online summits or conferences first tried to be launched, and people had these little virtual avatars floating around. Second World and all this other stuff, and it just never caught, obviously.
Yeah.
But now there could be, the platform that I'm going to be using for our summit in the beginning of April, called Hey Summit, has it where you have separate rooms, and there's going to be a vendor room, and there's going to be sidebars if they want to talk to the amazing Mr. Robert about data, because he's going to data the crap out of it. Then you can go talk to Robert, and be in that room where it can be a discussion. So there may be some kind of combination. But from a financial point of view for high tech and so forth, you got to imagine that all those vendors that are usually, what do they pay? $900 for a 6-foot table? In 2000,
it's a lot more than that, I think.
Yeah, right. Now there's going to be like, well, maybe not. And then you have again Rock, which relies upon the attendance pull of high tech.
Yep.
How's that going to look? And do you give some semblance? When I was at Navigate this past week, then I was in San Antonio. Most of my discussion with them was, I asked them, I was like, why aren't you recording all the sessions? Oh, it's financially, AV is expensive, so forth and so on. And I showed them my Mevo camera, which is 2 inches tall. I'm like, dude, put this on a monostick, like I just showed you here, stick it in the room, and boom, it's fully recorded. It's a little TV studio. And you can go live broadcast if you want to, but at least it gets recorded.
Right.
Pump it and plug it into your AV box over there. And then I get a kick out of it. So here's a room that maybe holds, 80 people. And they had, and Tim, you'll appreciate this, they had, I think, a 64 pot mix board in the room.
Oh, yeah.
It was a studio. I mean, it was this big, and I'm like, and they had one speaker, and we were only running 2 labs. And it was this massive, and they paid for that, obviously,
Sure, of course.
Yep. But that's what the issue. But just broadcasting, I think, is going to change. I think our methodology of communication is going to change, even if on the short-term sense, it's going to change.
No, undoubtedly on the longer term as well. I mean, if you think about the fact that there are people who have a career for real, or maybe I shouldn't say a career, a job anyway, on YouTube, on Twitch, on TikTok, right?
Yeah. Instagram.
Instagram influencers. I'll tell you. Do you know who King Princess is?
Yes.
No. Okay, so Robert does. Lauren, you don't. It's okay. She's a pop star. She's a pop artist.
Okay.
Pop artist, and 60 Minutes did a profile of her. And I believe she uses the female pronouns, so I apologize if I'm being inappropriate. She may go by them, but nonetheless, 60 Minutes did a profile of them. Last fall at some point, and talked about how she was going to be the breakout new star. Okay, she was going to be huge, and I mentioned it to my daughter in passing because I thought it was funny. I was like, 60 Minutes says she's going to be the breakout new star, right? And my daughter laughed hysterically because she said, folks, where have you been?
Yeah.
She's not the breakout. She's not going to be the breakout new star. I'm looking at her YouTube channel. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you could hear that, but I could hear it. She has 275,000 subscribers on YouTube, has had for years.
Yeah.
Her videos, let's see, music, let's see, can I sort these by most popular? Yep, I sure can. Sort by most popular. From 2 years ago, one of her videos has 11 million views. Another one has 6 million. Another one has 4 million. Another one has 3.3 million. Wow. Another one has 2.2 million. Meanwhile, 60 Minutes, the media choice of old people, let's be fair, right, is going, well, wait, there's this cool kid who someday is going to be a star. And my daughter's reaction was, these people are out of their minds. She is a star. She's not going to be a star. She's an enormous star. I'm sorry?
Is that Ed Sullivan and the Beatles?
Yeah, right. Exactly. She doesn't have a video that doesn't have 1 million views, right? She is a big star, and has been a big star. I used to do a bit in a talk. I haven't done it in a while, but I used to do a bit in a talk when I was a kid. When we were kids, when I was a kid, you guys were middle aged. Sorry,
that one left a mark.
Sorry. So the last year that I used to know these numbers for, this was like 2011 or 2012, and I apologize. It's starting to get late, and I'm gonna have to go in a minute. But I'll try to tell this quick. The last year that I knew numbers for off the top of my head was like 2012 or 2013 or somewhere in there. So this is 6 or 7 years out of date right now. The number one highest rated regularly scheduled broadcast on television, right, was The Big Bang Theory.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the highest rated regularly scheduled television broadcast of the year was the season finale of American Idol.
Right.
Okay. All right. The Big Bang Theory would not have cracked the top 20 in 1983. 30 years long earlier.
Exactly.
In terms of its ratings. and American Idol, the season finale of American Idol, would have just barely cracked the top 10. It actually had lower ratings than what an episode of The Cosby Show got on a typical Thursday night in 1983.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Media fragmentation has been going on for it has been going on for 10 years or more. And, as marketers, our job, when we work with our hotels and as hotels are doing this, is to say, what are the channels that matter to your guests? What are the channels where your guests are? And how do we get in front of them in those places, right? What are the front doors you want to be in? Because it's not a commercial on 60 Minutes. It might be if your guests are, I'm not being funny about this, I'm not trying to be snarky. It might be if your guests are, 55 to 64 and, watch television. But if your guests are 25 to 34 and that's where you're going the wrong place. Completely and utterly,
Well, and actually, I'm looking at last year's numbers. The average kind of Big Bang Theory, probably around, and NCIS, even Game of Thrones, Young Sheldon, all those, 15 to 17 million viewers, something like that.
Which is a huge number, by
That's
the
a
way.
big number.
That's a huge number to get every Tuesday night or whatever.
Right.
Like, that is not a small number. Let's be fair.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, but like you said, we're talking about the fact that
what did The Cosby Show get in 1983?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It got literally like 25 or 30 million.
Yeah. Right, I'm sure.
Marketing used to be easy. This actually was where I used to go with this part of the talk. Marketing used to be easy. It was really easy in the 80s, right? Just buy a commercial on The Cosby Show, just buy a commercial on MASH, just buy a commercial on whatever, and you can be fairly comfortable. A healthy chunk of the American population will see it.
Yeah.
It was even easier. It was easy. It took a lot of damn money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It took a lot of damn money, but if you had the money, it was a piece of cake.
Right.
Yeah. If you go back 30 years before that to Ed Sullivan, there's a reason why people remember, before I was born, but there's a reason why people remember the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, because literally it was the only thing on.
Yeah.
The Ed Sullivan share, so the percentage of TVs that were turned to that show at that time at a given period every week. Robert, do you know this? Correct me if I'm wrong here. It was north.
I saw it.
It was north of 50.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Meaning half the TVs that were on were watching the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And it wasn't because the Beatles were on. It's because you had two channels. It was either you were watching Ed Sullivan or you were watching not Ed Sullivan. There weren't
CBS. There was CBS, ABC, NBC, PBS, and maybe a local station.
When Ed Sullivan was on, you didn't have ABC. ABC didn't exist yet, did it?
Oh yeah, it did. Yeah.
Did it by that point? Okay. All right.
But the only limitation back then was the fact of whether the house had a TV. There was still the saturation of the medium.
And we watched it on a black and white television.
Sure,
you were mentioning the rabbit ears. That's what we had. You had to go, we'll tune the channel. And,
my wife, who I'd like to point out is very young, I want to be very clear about this, grew up in a very small town in the middle of Illinois, right? A very, very small town, halfway between Chicago and St. Louis.
Have they put a statue in yet?
They have, actually. It's funny. We're going to the unveiling next week.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. And when she was a kid, they had two channels because they were so far from Chicago and so far from St. Louis that all they could get were the two channels that were in Springfield, Illinois.
Right.
Right. One of both of which were networks, so they had, I think, NBC and CBS, but she couldn't get ABC, or she had ABC, but she didn't have CBS or whatever.
Right.
But the point being that that's not that long ago. It's not last week, obviously, but I mean, it's but it's not that long ago.
It's true. It's very true.
If
and now they're basically an endless number of channels. You were saying about cord cutting, right?
Yeah.
So we've gotten a little nuts because. Don't tell Amazon and Hulu, but I've subscribed to everything because my family, my daughters, everybody's on the same account. So we've got I've got a Roku, right? I'm hooked up to Sling, right, which gives me a bunch of stuff. We've got a Tableau that gets all the HD stuff, just over the air, which is great, right? So that plus we've got Amazon, Hulu, Disney Plus. I mean, go down we can't remember, HBO, Showtime. Yeah, it's just like we've got.
But now they're remonetizing it by fragmenting what you can get on different channels.
Well, yeah.
That's a Sling. Sling did that. I actually don't have, even with Disney Plus, all I got was ESPN Plus. So you don't get live sports on ESPN unless I move to like a $45, or I can't remember. Yeah, $45 instead of $20.
Right. But I have Hulu because they're putting on stuff on Hulu now that they didn't have on something else. I have it's CBS Access because of stuff, and you want certain shows you want to follow, and you watch them because of that reason. And yes, it is the same. But all these channels, the point from a marketing perspective is all of these channels have to be fed,
right?
And you have the chance to now really target geographically where you didn't before. The early stages, the only ones that could really get geographic targeting were Fox.
Yeah.
And now I can get geographic targeting pretty much on most stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can hit a market and feeder markets much more effectively and less waste in other areas. I still have waste because it still includes places I don't really care because of their footprints that they sell. But I can really get pretty close to pinpointing the places that I want to feed my message to. And putting video together is not really super hard. Yeah. It just knowing what you need to put it so that it actually is effective. We've watched enough commercials in our life to know what works, doesn't work. You just have to translate to what resources you have for what you're selling and communicate that.
Well, and the changes, I mean, late night TV, Johnny Carson, that sort of thing used to be, that was a sort of like key thing. That has now been so broken apart. I listened to a thing with Conan O'Brien. Fascinating what he's done, right? He went from a 1 hour show down to a 30-minute show because he figured out nobody really wants to watch the other,
that's right. That's right.
3, right?
Right.
So he does his monologue. He knows people like that. They know the A guest, and that's what he does. So he's down to 30 minutes. He does his podcasts, and then he basically has the thing, cut up so he can publish it all on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's where most of his viewership is coming from, right? As opposed to, regular, I think I don't know if he's on TBS or whatever, but
TBS, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, totally different business. I mean,
Tim's been doing that for years with his podcast.
Yeah.
You hit your hard point, you go through what you want to make with your hard point, and you say, hey, look at the clock on the wall, blah, blah, gotta go. Bye.
Well, I learned this lesson years ago, and I'm gonna bring this back to Robert and the influencers for a second, because the first place this ever occurred to me, and somebody pointed it out. We were having a discussion, a friend of mine and I, about Dancing with the Stars. This was in something I wrote, and I never published it. So it's I'm going to read a somewhat lengthy excerpt, and I apologize. It's not super long. It's a paragraph, right? But we were talking about Dancing with the Stars, the television show. Now, this goes back a few years ago, so some of these people are going to sound like I'm talking about the Dark Ages.
One of my wife's favorite shows.
Right. So Dancing with the Stars. And my friend was talking about the fact that nobody's ever heard of these people. And I was like, that's weird that they're putting these people on, they're not stars. Nobody's ever heard of them. And I'm like,
right. Well, they started with stars, and then it's like, oh, we need more than 2 seasons.
No. That's not the reason, though. That's not the reason.
Oh, okay.
Here's the reason, right? Dancing with the stars themselves reflect the reality of today's audience. It's broad fragmentation. When Bill Cosby, Tom Selleck, or Joan Collins appeared on TV 30 years ago, by the way, if I wrote it today, clearly Bill Cosby wouldn't be somebody I would reference, but you get my point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When Bill Cosby, Tom Selleck, or Joan Collins appeared on TV 30 years ago, most of the country knew their faces and names. But Corbin Bleu, Nicole Snooki Polizzi, Bill Engvall, and Bill Nye, with no disrespect intended to any, not one has ever appeared as a featured performer on a network television series or in a Hollywood film. Their fame comes from attracting a niche audience. In fact, only 4 of the 16 contestants in the most recent season met that criteria. 5 if you count former NFL standout Keyshawn Johnson. But niche doesn't mean unimportant. Each of these stars is quite famous among their fans, attracting fiercely loyal fan bases. Yeah. Bill Engvall has captured more than 650,000 Facebook likes and 111,000 Twitter followers. Corbin Bleu has over 1 million people following his Twitter feed, 90,000 plus Instagram followers, and almost 500,000 likes on Facebook.
Yeah.
Bill Nye has over 1.25 million Twitter followers and 2.5 million Facebook likes, plus another 68,000 followers on Instagram. And Snooki, despite being just something short of a national punchline during her time on MTV's The Jersey Shore, has nearly 7 million followers on Twitter, 4.3 million followers on Instagram, and over 10 million likes on Facebook.
Yeah.
How many brands can say the same thing? Certainly not NFL star and ESPN television personality Keyshawn Johnson, nor most of his 20,000 followers.
Yeah.
If you're looking to partner with a celebrity to promote your product, who among these performers represents your best option?
And that's why TimPeter.com, being based in New Jersey, has gone all in with his Snooki cross-sell promotion.
No, but the last point here is put them all together and you have a market.
Right.
Put them all together and you have an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's not that any one of them attracts an audience. It's that each one attracts a distinct audience.
Right.
And when you put them all on the same show, now you have an audience.
You get a nice little
show.
mosaic there.
And it's a nice connection to influencers because it's not an off-the-shelf one size fits all. It's not a. It's your and you target your influencer engagements based on the demographics you're trying to draw.
Correct. Right. Yeah. Correct. And so maybe you need for your hotel. Sometimes you need a Corbin Bleu. Sometimes you need a Bill Nye. Sometimes you need a Snooki. Sometimes you need a Keyshawn Johnson, depending on who you're talking to.
And it's funny if you.
And that's the thing Robert talks about really well in his brilliant influencer presentation for Real. Is it's not the influencer, it's their audience that matters. Yeah.
You go back to the first year that Dancing with the Stars came out, and I was looking at it, and I remember commenting to Renee, it's like, my God, they're just throwing any crap on the TV that they can on this. And if you bet me $1 million at the time that they would even do the second show, I would have been like, no, that who cares?
Oh, my wife loves that show because our two daughters were big into dance, right? So I would wind up watching with her. The big one was So You Think You Could Dance, right? That was actually a really interesting, creative. I think it's still on. I don't know. I think I'm not sure.
8 seasons, 2 seasons a year. Every year for the last 15 years.
Right. So You Think You Can Dance, that was that. And then they did the Dancing with the Stars thing, right? And it was like, oh, I don't like this one as much. But again, they changed things around. They've got a host. They've got Aaron Andrews in there and stuff like that. And they've done they did the guy from America's Home Videos is the host, who's actually a very good host. He does a good job. They've got Aaron Andrews, who's very good, and again, kind of because they have sports celebrities, things like that. That helps her. She's very well known. And they have done and it's Disney, right? So they can feed a lot of their stars, and like you mentioned, Corbin Bleu and things like that. They've got this big so they've got ESPN and that, so they're actually fostering their stable of product too. So again, the thing's a machine.
They manipulate the message, and what they do, just like you said with Conan O'Brien, he realized what were the parts that people liked, and what were the parts they didn't like. Because you're talking about going to dance, So You Think You Can Dance and so forth. They've changed the format of that show a dozen times, probably.
Oh, sure.
These other shows, because they're trying to find that magic mix where people truly enjoy it. There were times where they used to do all the really bad dancers to feature them, and the same thing with the American Idol stuff. They used to do the she bang, that kind of thing.
Right.
And now they just get to the talent, the performance, the people at the end.
Well, people got exhausted of Simon Cowell ripping people apart who were like legitimately trying and were pretty good, right? And that that mean cruelty. Now, like The Voice is the same thing, right? They try to be really supporting, coach them. How can you make this person better? Give them a shot. And I think but
these are all the lessons about marketing I want to get to. Is that with your hotel, the idea of room and rate and location is gone. In the sense, it's always a prevalent aspect of your messaging, but it's about the people you're talking to, what they are interested in understanding and knowing about you. And to your point, Tim, the channel and the medium that they're using to get to it, and the people that they're looking to expose them to it, are all the things that are a decision process for our marketing choices. Right. It's not just about whether we're putting an ad in a newspaper or whatever. Those days are gone. The looking for the channel, looking for the message, looking for the messenger are the decisions we're looking at.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
there is some framing though about the location, right? People aren't going to stay in.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that still definitely matters.
In
Google-
Parsippany if they want to be in
Google's
Midtown
solved that.
Manhattan, right? And
Google's
you
already
do have some
solved
price
that.
concern. Yeah, no, but you kind of get that framing. Then all of a sudden, the scrum is inside that. Yeah,
but what I'm saying is that
box.
Google, we are living in a world that we have to follow behind Google.
Mhm.
It's a permanent aspect of our marketing now. If you look at which mobile is internet,
I'm going to push back on the word permanent. It is a crucial part of our
Right.
marketing now. 5 years from now, Google could be gone.
true. There's a permanence to it right now about
It's
us having to deal with
dominant. It is absolutely dominant.
Tim must be very, very bullish on federal regulation.
No. What I am bullish on is Amazon and Alibaba and other folks. The problem that Google has, and I've made this rant more than once on the show, and I feel bad because Lauren, I feel like we're cutting you off, and your point is spot on. Your point is spot on. Google is dominant right now. There is nothing in the foreseeable future that's going to knock them off. There's nothing immediate that's going to knock them off their perch today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But what their biggest problem is, they have the least lock-in of any company ever with that level of power. If somebody came out with a better search engine tomorrow, which would be incredibly hard to do, the switching costs for consumers to go and use Bing instead of Google or Amazon instead of Google or
DuckDuckGo does pretty well without
Google or whatever.
nearly the resources.
Correct. I mean, the ability of customers to move from using Google to using something else is pretty much, not like you switch like that. So that's the biggest threat to Google. It's one of the reasons that they are so dominant and they compete so aggressively and the like. It's because they know customers could leave them instantly.
Well, and 38, apparently the stats I've seen, 38% of travelers would like to be able to book on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
That's a big number.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's Google's biggest threat. But,
and I agree with you on
that. But we should assume that we should absolutely, nobody should hear what I just said and say, oh, well, then screw Google. I'm not going to worry about that because that would be a massive mistake. Let me
I look at it, it's kind of like a battlefield in the sense that you have to give up the territory that you no longer can control. And when going to your point, Robert, about location and so forth, of course, those are aspects. They're table stakes in conversation.
Right.
Those things are there. Now, Google, where mobile-centric, internet is mobile, you have to scroll past almost 8 pages of Google before you get to the first influential organic placement. Just and depending upon your screen size, obviously. Results may vary. But
no argument.
Look at everything that they have between the map with the bubbles and the prices, the Google Zero aspect of it, all of those things, the hotel finder and what have you. Stop trying to do all that for yourself as much as Google's already done it for you. I'm not saying you ignore those things, but focusing that as your strategy of you producing that in lieu of what Google's producing, you're not going to be the authority on that information. I'm not saying you don't have your own maps. I'm not saying you don't have your own rates and everything.
Well,
in your site.
but that's why. But that's why you participate in Google My Business. That's why you participate in Google Meta. At
the end of the day, there is a key element that Google can never ever replace, and that is you engaging with your guest.
That's right. The on-property experience. Well,
on-property is the thing that you still have. No, I'm not saying that they can't get in there. I'm just saying that this is your strongest ability to interact.
Correct. I agree completely.
Absolutely. I could still be staring at my phone and Google tell me to take a left or right in the hallway. I know, and they're trying to be that. They're trying to be. Right. I don't have to talk to anybody. I can get into my room and everything. Google will take care of everything, including books and what have you. So, but amplifying your ability to communicate with your guest and creating a direct relationship with them is still the best, strongest, your own content kind of thing. But don't fight Google trying to think you're going to replace what they're doing for you. Augment it, amplify it, refer to it, use it, exploit it, but don't overthink it.
That's exactly
well, and just quick case study here. I looked Seattle, right? Having problems with coronavirus. These hotels are probably like, what can we do for business? At this point, I did a search incognito, right? Okay, so Google does know my IP address in Texas, but the first hotel brand that came up, Marriott, second slot, second page. Thompson Hotel, 8th slot, second page. That was, that's it. Everything else was filled with OTAs, and going further down.
That's what I've always found to try to use incognito is to flip on my VPN and start bouncing on cities.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then Hyatt winds up on 4th slot on the 3rd page. Hilton winds up actually. Oh, interesting. Is that? Oh, that's an individual Hilton hotel. That's actually very odd. Yeah, they start popping up on the 3rd page. Hilton, you got the IHG, which happens to be Ace individual Staybridge Suites, which is interesting. Yeah,
Robert, since we did not even tackle your list today, and you had some really excellent articles in, I want to remind everyone.
Oh,
it will
and
be
there
in the
was
show
one.
notes.
Okay, there was a subtext on the Oh, and we forgot the pitch for it. If you want to get the Rock Cheetah
I
Hospitality
did it at the beginning of the
update-
show. I already did it at the
Oh,
beginning.
you
of the show.
did? Oh, I missed. Well, we'll do it again. We need to mention it like 8 to 12 times. So.
Bitly.
Bit.ly/Rock Cheetah, all lowercase. Yes.
Yeah.
Would be,
So I know
And actually,
guys,
I really do have to
Yeah.
run. We've gotten very long today. Well, I don't know if we've gone very long. I've gone very long today.
Well, we did. We're at our 2-hour mark, and believe me, yes, we're
Oh,
not taking our own advice about knowing what people really like.
the one thing, yeah.
We're
The one
ignoring
thing I
all
was,
advice.
the one thing I was going to tell Tim before he goes, because I thought he might appreciate this. I put these things together, but there were a couple of odd articles that people may have seen that it was under. Where was it? The marketing and was it marketing and strategy? No. Where was it? Oh, anyway, I had 2 of them. One was what to do if you're a startup, because if the hotel industry collapses and everybody's out doing their own startup, that would be a really good resource to look at what you have to do to put things together. And then the second one were the top AI companies. So if you want to be in a hot sector, it's AI. So I put those 2 articles in there to help the industry if things get really bad.
So Tim, two things. One is on a sidebar. Please let me know when you would like to talk about setting up the skill on Alexa. I'll be more than happy to.
I appreciate that.
With you.
I genuinely appreciate that. That's very kind of you, Lauren.
No, I'm happy to do it. I would love to see people really realize how well your excellent podcast that you have, and if it makes it easier for them to find it, then I am very happy for it.
And you're going to wind up at a landing page on hospitality with the marketing that links over to Tim Peter, but that's okay.
No. And Mr. Tim, if they want to know more about you and about what it is that you do and so forth, where is it they can find you, sir?
Yeah, timpeter.com. That's for all that. And I am at TC Peter on Twitter. I'm usually Tim Peter on most places, but TC Peter on Twitter.
And I do want to catch up with you because there's lots of questions as to I haven't talked to you in a while. So I'd love to go over and catch up with you on a sidebar somewhere and hear what's going on.
Perfect.
Excellent. Mr. Robert, I know we didn't do the rot row or the boop at this point.
I know. And they were international ones. The boop was on the Buttigieg effect, which is Malta, which is a cool little place that nobody really knew about, but that's where his name came from. And then the rut row was I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, the Ryongong Hotel, which is North Korea's Hotel of Doom, which still hasn't opened or anything, but apparently they do have a light show from the tallest hotel in the world and 1,300 unoccupied rooms. But anyway, that's the rut row.
And like I said, this will all be in the show notes for it. But Mr. Robert, if you want to know more about
Robert K. Cole on social media or rockcheetah.com.
And for signing up for your newsletter once again, so we make it in multiples.
Bit.ly, that's bit.ly/rockcheetah, all lowercase.
No space.
And where can they find everything about Lauren Gray?
Yeah. Well, if they want to know the really good Lauren Gray, they can go to TikTok and watch Lauren Gray sing.
Or Instagram, or
the really popular Lauren Gray is on TikTok. For me, you can find everything of this show and all previous 238 shows at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you'll find links to all the episodes and Mr. Robert's excellent curated list for each of the shows that he produces for us each week. And then, of course, we'll be doing our podcast this week as well, and that is Hospitality Marketing Podcast. Coincidentally, the same show number, 239. And that is going to be this afternoon. It'll come out, and that's between 20 to 30 minutes long. And so far, I've kept my promise. I've kept it under 30 for all of them so far, which is, for me, as people know, quite stellar of an event. So And
This
we are
is a
launching
timer
a-
that cuts off the feed at 30 minutes.
and
for
I
that.
get to announce two things. One is we're doing our marketing summit on how to market in a declining demand economy, and that's at the beginning of April. And the second is we're launching a new podcast with help of Lily Mockerman called Hospitality Revenue Management.
Nice.
Oh.
Very nice. Very cool.
And guess what's going to be after that one is hospitality sales.
Oh.
I'm trying to get Holly coursed into a time schedule with her on that. So,
And
we will
then
have
hospitality world domination.
world
Yes.
domination. Actually, I was going to do hospitality operations because I have a great ops guy that I think can contribute to stuff. And so I'm trying to hit the pillars of our business in a way that is just pretty much specific.
That's excellent. How to walk people the best possible way when the revenue management and sales and digital marketing guys all screw up.
And Robert, I'm going to be hitting you up because I thought you should do a type of hospitality data podcast.
Oh, yeah, I got
So,
data.
Mr. Jim, I'm happy to make a skill set for you, but man, you're going to have some other people in the family joining you on podcasts, hopefully.
Well, that's okay.
There's more the merrier, absolutely.
The more the merrier. Absolutely right. Absolutely
There's not enough talk about hospitality. But anyway, thank you everyone that has joined us on all the multiple platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all of that. And for everyone else, next week, show number 240, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. We hope to join you there. If you want to sign up for registration, go to bit.ly/HDM show 240 and sign up for next week's show. With that in mind, gentlemen, thank you all so very much. And we will see you hopefully next week.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye now.
We aren't on TikTok yet?